The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
This is something very important for all of us, and it's a vaccine EO. I'm delighted to be here in the Oval Office as our administration takes another historic step in our mission to make America healthy again. Today, we're proud to officially announce the United States of America's gold standard childhood vaccination recommendations, and that has to do with many subjects, but including autism in particular. I want to thank the man who has done more than perhaps anyone else to bring about this real revolution, Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., my friend, and he's doing a fantastic job. I'm proud of you. Give me one a very powerful hand to use.
Very powerful hand of Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Kane. Breaking news from last night in the Oval Office. We have an executive order lessening the number of vaccines. Here's the Defender story on it last night. Also, emphasizing the importance of maximal parental authority over these choices, honoring the Constitution, and so much more is in this. Basically, we had Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in the Oval Office talking as if he was at a CHD conference 5 years ago. There's the shot there, and basically saying Andy Wakefield was right. Almost saying that. Andy is going to be on CHD TV tomorrow to be discussing this. But right now, I am honored to have Mary Holland, CEO of Children's Health Defense, to get her take on this really groundbreaking, revolutionary executive order. Mary, thank you so much for joining me this morning. What say you? What do you think about this?
Michael, as you know, I'm very excited about this executive order. I've been studying it all morning, and it's not everything we want, but Bobby Kennedy, as the founder of Children's Health Defense, exactly what you're saying, took into the Oval Office with the president, the head of NIH, the domestic policy advisor, everything that we've been saying. Separate the shots, reduce them. Look at aluminum adjuvants. It has to have maximal parental authority. You have to have religious exemptions. You have to have medical exemptions. You need to do real research. You need to have real transparency. All of the things, Michael, that we've been talking about literally for decades was in that room. And even though this executive order does not do everything that we think it should do or we would like for it to do, it still is recommending 11 shots to all children. It's recommending more to high-risk children. It has shared clinical decision-making. What it is doing that I think is so exciting, so important, is that it's saying we're going to maximize parental choice. We're going to ensure religious liberty. We're going to ensure that the federal government uses the funding leverage. We're going to ensure that the federal government utilizes the attorney general to make sure that these things happen. And there's continual review. So one of the lawsuits that Children's Health Defense indirectly supported was brought by Ray Flores last year to force the HHS secretary to recreate the task force for safer vaccines that is statutorily required under the 1986 Act. It had gone defunct, Michael, in 1998. It had never reported to Congress as it was required to do. So this HHS task force is central to what Secretary Kennedy was saying. And within 90 days, that task force is going to report back to the president, and they're going to talk about how they're going to create single doses of the MMR. They're going to talk about what they're doing about adjuvants. They're going to ensure continuous evaluation of the risks and benefits of all vaccines. They're going to improve transparency. So even though, for instance, Michael, I feel very strongly that the HPV vaccine, Gardasil, should not be recommended to every child. I wrote a book about vaccines, the HPV vaccine on trial with my colleagues, Kim Mack-Rosenberg and Eileen Iorio. I think it's a terrible vaccine. Even though that's being recommended now, there's nothing that says that under this EO, it can't be changed in 90 days, in 180 days, in 360 days, all of that can now take place through this process. And as you and I were saying, clearly this executive order on some level was prompted by the American Academy of Pediatrics lawsuit against Kennedy. We, Children's Health Defense, stepped into that lawsuit because we felt like they needed DOJ, Kennedy needed additional support in that. But basically this overturns, this is like stepping ahead, is leapfrogging ahead of any litigation that the AAP is bringing against the federal government right now and saying, this is the policy of the US. Whatever that statute said about creating an ACIP, that's not really, the president is the executive who oversees and implements and has authority over the executive branch. So good luck, AAP, in turning this around through litigation. This is based on a prior executive order and a presidential memo. So I'm very excited, not only for what this does, Michael, but for what it portends over the next couple of years. I think we as a community have to get behind this.
Absolutely. And, Mary, we've had a number of victories similar to this throughout the past year and a half, always announced on a Friday at 5 p.m. And that was not what just happened. This was announced 3 p.m. on a Monday. It's going to be in the news cycle this entire week, at least right at the beginning of the election cycle of campaigning. Right. Clearly, this was greenlit by Susie Wiles, who was the chief of staff, who Trump calls the most powerful woman in the world. To me, that is the biggest part of this. Right. They're realizing this is a critical issue for them to get voters out.
Yeah, so Susie Wiles' protege, medical doctor Heidi Overton, was standing right next to Bobby Kennedy. She spoke. She is a domestic policy advisor. That was signaling, I think, to us and to the pharmaceutical industry and the deep state, if you will. Susie Wiles is behind this, and they need the MAHA vote. And frankly, this is big news. This is not window dressing. This is real. This is saying there's an ongoing process to reevaluate vaccines. And no matter what our recommendations are, parents are in charge and religious liberty is serious. So I'm very encouraged, Michael. I'm very encouraged. And I'm very encouraged. I think people should take this into consideration as they consider what they want to do in November.
Oh, I agree. And, with that, I want to bring into the conversation here John Gilmore, who is with the Interagency Autism Coordination Committee appointed by Secretary Kennedy. John, welcome to Good Morning CHD. Talk to us a bit about this. In a minute, I'm going to talk to John about the IACC and an amazing plan that they have ready to go forward about autism. But before we do that, John, talk about what just happened yesterday with this EO and your take on this.
Well, before I say anything, I am a member of the Interagency Autism Coordinating Committee, but I do not speak for the committee. I don't speak for anything related to it. I speak for myself, and I speak for the Autism Action Network. So with that caveat, it's very, very, very exciting. This is an absolute sea change on any number of levels. What I'm most excited about personally is I live in New York, where we have this absolutely draconian vaccine regime here. No religious exemptions, almost no medical exemptions here. And what I take away from what I read and what I've heard so far is that basically at this point, we can basically count on the Department of Justice to probably sue New York and the other 4 states that do not provide religious or conscience exemptions, right? And it's a long time coming. And even better than that, okay, because it's going to be a lot faster, is it the way I read it is that the president has empowered the Department of Education, HHS, Bobby Kennedy, to withhold money from the states, which is infinitely faster than the courts, and there's no appeal. You can't go to the Supreme Court or whatever to try and fight it. Just do this or you don't get the money, right? And nothing speaks more to a state governor, really, is what it boils down to, than ending up with an enormous hole in their budget, right? So this is really a power step, an important step forward. I'm very excited about just that aspect of it. I'm really happy about the emphasis that he's put on research, which we can get into, because that's where the IACC comes in. There's some controversy going on right now with the IACC because our first draft of a strategic, one of the things that we have to do is write a strategic plan for autism that the federal government is supposed to adhere to. It's advisory, but that's supposed to be what it does according to statute. And it's a great plan. Just quickly, my son was diagnosed 25 years ago, right? And in those 25 years, the federal government has produced nothing of use to families dealing with autism at all. No treatments, no cures. They haven't found the cause. They haven't really done anything. And what this new strategic plan does is take the federal government's research program in a completely different direction. It has very specific plans to address the physical, biological problems that people with autism frequently have: apraxia, seizures, GI issues, on and on and on and on, right? And it's written in such a way, very carefully, that it includes looking at environmental causes, and it also potential effects that medical products or procedures could have. All right, that's integrated into the study plan, but it nowhere mentions the word vaccine, right? And I think that's a mistake, and I think maybe earlier in the year that might have made sense, but what we have seen here yesterday is a complete 180-degree flip in the focus of the White House and the administration on vaccines and autism. All right. And clearly, it seems to me that they've decided that this is a winner. This is going to be a winner in November. And so I think we are in a position now where there's an open comment period. The program isn't done for the strategic plan, but I think we have to put in specific plans for studying autism. Clearly, this is what the president's calling for in this executive order. So,
well, John,
it's basically following with what the president has already said he wants seen done.
I agree 100%. And speaking of that, I want to show this clip. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., as Secretary of Health and Human Services, speaking in the Oval Office on a Monday afternoon, almost identical to how he would speak at a Children's Health Defense conference 5 years ago. Let's show that clip.
In 1970, the biggest epidemiological study at that time in history was performed. And the university scientists from across this country looked at all the 8-year-olds in Wisconsin, about 900,000 children. And they were looking for autism, and they knew what autism looked like. And they came back with an incident rate of 0.8 per 10,000. So less than 1 in 10,000. The rate, according to CDC today in this country, is 1 in every 31 children. In California, it's 1 in every 19 children, 1 in every 12.5 boys. Oh, there has been a dramatic increase. One of the things that the industry likes to say, one of the talking points, which the press loves to parrot, is, oh, we're just noticing it more. But this is an absurdity, and this is an assertion that has been debunked again and again and again by peer-reviewed literature. But it's also debunked by common sense. Because if we were just noticing it more, we would notice it in older groups. But we're not. We're only noticing it in kids who were born around 1989 or after. The older generations, you're not seeing those increases. So something happened in the mid-90s that changed our children, and it has to be an environmental exposure. Because genes don't cause epidemics. They can provide a vulnerability, but you need an environmental toxin. And what the president has charged us with is finding which one of those exposures or which collection of exposures are causing this epidemic.
Finding an environmental toxin that is the root cause for the autism epidemic in America. He's saying that's what the president has tasked him to. That's what he's doing on a Monday in August, just months before the midterm elections, with Susie Wiles' deputy next to him. I mean, the tea leaves are good on this one. The tea leaves are good on this one overall. John, what do you think?
Um, it's I guess it could have been better, but not in the real world. Really, I think it's great, right? Because what it does is it's going to give all the states parents the right to choose, right? And I think and people are exercising that right. And I think eventually what's going to happen is it's going to be impossible to not notice the difference between the two groups of children, right? I mean, I think that's true already, right? And I mean, it's just very powerful. He's the secretary and the president too, in his comments, is basically talking like one of us, one of the parents who have been dealing with these situations for many, many, many years. And this is completely new, and it's very, very powerful. And I think we're really going to see some significant changes as a result of it.
I agree with you. I want to talk a little bit about, well, actually, you at Autism Action Network, you've put out an action alert related to autism and related
Right.
to the IACC
Right.
draft. People should go to autismactionnetwork.org. Take a look at this. This is a wonderful plan the IACC has put together. It deals with some topics I want to talk further with you on, John, including one that housing. We have this autism generation now going into 20 and 30 and in the next decade 40 years old. What's going to happen as the families are no longer there to care for them? What are we going to do on housing? Some critical issues, but also the action that we just put up that is in the show notes below, that's linked below, is saying we do need to add the V word to this plan. We do need to add vaccine to it to ensure that it's not overlooked. And clearly, after yesterday, President Trump is indicating entirely that, yeah, he wants to look at this as well, too. Vaccines are not off the table. This is not something that is being pushed to the corner, as we have felt over the past 7 or 8 months that was happening. That is done. This is now, back present again.
A couple interesting things here is that one of the things that the president in his comments and in the executive order calls for is separating the measles, mumps, rubella components of the MMR vaccines, right? And that was done in Japan back in the 90s, because in Japan, they noticed that once they introduced the MMR, they saw a lot more injuries that they didn't see with the separate shots, right? But Japan was capable of taking that kind of information in and changing policy to protect the kids, which we seem to be unable to do there. Another note about that is one of the proponents of that is none other than Andy Wakefield, the British doctor who back in the 90s noticed a series of kids coming into his GI practice who had this new kind of disorder. And he related it, he didn't say it caused it, he sort of related it to the MMR. And one of his recommendations was to separate the MMR. Okay, he did not say don't get it. He says, let's do that and see if things are safer, right? And now we have the President of the United States talking about that. Another really interesting, as you just pointed out, housing is going to be a big issue, okay? Well, why is housing a big issue now when it wasn't 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago, right? And it relates directly to what the secretary was saying, is that we simply just didn't see this years ago. It wasn't there, okay? And it's only believable if you think that people would not have noticed a child or adult incapable of speaking, right? Which is about a third to 40% of all people with an autism diagnosis cannot speak, right? And we just simply overlook that, right? It's just completely implausible. So I think what we're doing here is what the president is doing with this executive order is he's basically putting to rest a lot of the completely bogus myths that have been promoted about vaccines and autism. And it's just a great thing that it's happening finally.
Yeah,
Took us a quarter century to get here, but here we are.
Right. Right. And with the IACC plan as well, too, a marvelous plan. A number of people have said to me, we've taken 20, 30 years to get to this point, and we're not going to put vaccines,
Right.
into this critical plan. We're not going to call for curiosity
Right.
around this. Yeah, absolutely. This is our moment here.
Right.
Also another wonderful part of the IACC plan is discussing about treatment as well too, and what things need to be done in that area. Why don't you talk? I mean, I think you were the one who taught me that for decades in terms of treatment with autism. Nothing has changed. There's been
No.
no advancement.
No, there's been no advancement at all. I mean, all the serious health problems related to autism are not treated as part of autism itself. Okay, if your kid has GI issues, you go to the GI issues, and they do what they normally do for GI issues, right? But we don't really have any foundation of much studies of why is it that so many people with autism have apraxia, all right, which means they basically can't control. They have their body. That's why a lot of them can't speak, is because they simply cannot control their mouth. For example, my 26-year-old son cannot blow out a birthday candle because he can't purse his lips, right? Things like that. But that's not been studied. What we have done is we've done study after study after study after study of genes, okay? And which is good in a way, because what we've found out is, one, there is no autism gene, okay? They started out thinking, oh, we're going to find this gene that all the people with autism have, and it'll be real simple and we can deal with it. Well, they can't find it. What they're saying is they're finding literally hundreds of autism genes, right? However, not a single one of these genes appears in more than 1% of the people with autism, okay? Not one is in more than 1%, right? And none of them are really statistically significant, right? So basically, what they have proven is that there may be a genetic relationship to certain very, very specific, very, very small groups of it. But the only way you have 100 genes being involved in something is if there's an environmental thing out there as well, okay, that they don't want to look at, right? And what we're clearly going with this executive order is that we've got to take a much more serious look at, one, the role vaccines have in that, and then also what the other components within it, such as the adjuvants, the aluminum that was mentioned in it as well. It's definitely pointing and taking a much more serious, much broader, and much deeper look at what's going on with people in autism.
In terms of this executive action and executive order, the idea of an executive order dealing with vaccines, dealing with religious exemptions, parental rights, this has been a long conversation. I mean, at least a decade. This conversation has been ongoing, probably longer
Right.
than that. CHD played a role in that. We were drafting things, talking to all types of brilliant attorneys, doctors, and such, made recommendations to people in the White House. You as well, too, at Autism Action Network have been putting out the call for executive action for some time. When you did put those out, what were you asking for, and what do you think this executive order did? Was it what you were looking for? Was it less? Was it more? What do you think?
It's actually more. Okay. Basically, what we were looking for is the federal government to basically sue states or withhold money from them if they did not give parents choice. This executive order does that, but then it includes all the additional research, which was not, it's like, Santa brought you the pony, right? But then he also brought you a pony, and he brought you a baby elephant and a bunch of other stuff along with it. So it goes far beyond what we were asking for. One thing, though, that this is a great thing. However, it's an executive order, right? The next president can erase this on the day that he or she walks into office. So, not to spoil the party, but We still have a lot of work to do, I think, to try and pass legislation that requires us at the federal level. We've got the GRACE Act from Senator Mike Lee, and it was originated by Representative Stubbe from Florida. Great bill. Basically says what I was just saying about it's like, it gives the federal government the authority to sue or to withhold money if they don't, if states do not stop ignoring people's basic fundamental rights in their constitutional rights and other rights as well. So we got to keep on going with that.
Yeah, I agree with that. But what I'm also seeing with this executive order, tapping the DOJ, saying Department of Justice, be ready to sue states that aren't in line with this. We have the GRACE Act, as you pointed out, just got a Senate co-sponsor. It's a 2-House bill now. It could actually move. We have Aaron Siri's lawsuit, Miller v. McDonald, in New York, headed back to SCOTUS, possibly as early as October, looking very promising to be successful at SCOTUS. This is for the Amish who created their own school in their own private lands with their own completely unvaccinated children and are getting fined every day for that in New York, saying you can't do that. I think that the executive order also just provides a ton of momentum for what is already out there. You have at every single level of government, you have momentum on this. You have at the executive branch, you're having in the Supreme Court, we have momentum with this amazing case. In the legislative branch, we have the GRACE Act that is growing. So in terms of momentum, I think sometimes people forget just how powerful the executive branch is for just giving some power, giving some fuel to efforts that are ongoing. In a timing sense, this is just absolutely brilliant and perfect for a lot of the things that we're seeing out there that we need to have change, especially for parental choice when it comes to vaccination.
Now, if I could add something to this, I think this could end up being really important, right? What we saw throughout the United States in the deep blue states is they passed basically vaccine secession bills, right? They passed all these bills saying, we in New York, we in California, we're not bound by anything that the federal government's saying about vaccines anymore. We're going to do our own thing. Okay, here in New York, just this last week, we saw the first instance of that where the state is now recommending a COVID shot for pregnant women, all right? That's what the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists recommends. The federal government does not recommend that. The ACP doesn't that. And so we're beginning to have those challenges, okay? Now, I'm not a lawyer. I wish we had Mary here still, but it seems to me that this executive order, given how it laid out the whole series of what is recommended and what isn't, and empowering the DOJ to go after the states, I'm wondering if perhaps the next thing we might see is New York and other states that decide to freelance like they're doing may find themselves being sued by DOJ. I certainly hope so.
Well, to be continued. So much more to see that will happen. I'm actually very optimistic for what's going to happen in the fall now, having seen this, because I do believe a lot of this is a motor engine into the midterm elections as well, too. So I don't think we're going to see less. I actually think we're going to see more. But to be continued. We will see which way it goes. John Gilmore, Autism Action Network, appointee by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to the Interagency Autism Coordination Committee. Thank you so much. I'm sure you're going to be back on here as more news breaks very soon.
Thanks a lot, Michael. Take care.
Thank you so much. Don't go anywhere because it only gets better from here. Covering the Farm Bill and all things food, we have the brilliant Dr. Meryl Nass. Let's go to Meryl.
Good morning, CHD. Today, I am joined by Angela Huffman. Angela is a co-founder of an amazing organization called Farm Action. The website is farmaction.us. And Angela and Farm Action have looked into all the food and farming issues in great depth and produced wonderful reports on them. They do lobbying in Washington. They are total MAHA supporters, Bobby Kennedy supporters. And today, Angela and I are going to talk about 6 different food and farming issues that are present right now. In particular, we're going to start with this cyclosporiasis, which we know has affected more than 10,000 Americans, put more than 500 of them in the hospital. And we need to figure out why this happened and how to solve it so it doesn't happen again. Angela.
Hi, Meryl. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, great to see you. So, why do you think we have the largest number of cyclosporiasis cases, which is it's a diarrheal illness, gives you cramps, it can give you nausea, vomiting, weight loss, dehydration. Healthy people usually get over it in a couple of weeks. Non-healthy people can have it last a long time. Some people are having it recur even after antibiotics. What caused it? What can we do about it?
Well, Taylor Farms is the company behind this particular outbreak. This isn't the first. This isn't the first Cyclospora outbreak, or this is something that happens in the summers. This one's certainly much larger than we've seen in the past. But it traces back to Taylor Farms, which is one of the largest produce companies in the country. They're worth $7 billion. They have 30 processing facilities. 40% of the salad kits sold in the United States come from Taylor Farms. So that's almost half. They have a huge reach. So that's really, that's the root of the issue. A company of this size, they're supplying grocery stores, restaurants, prepared foods, schools, hospitals, other large institutions. And the problem is its food is often sold under either another company's brand or no brand at all. So consumers never see the Taylor Farms name. It's very hard to avoid it. So this outbreak, like you said, has caused thousands of illnesses. It's caused at least 2 deaths now. And it really shows how hard it can be to trace food when just one supplier feeds into so many different brands and businesses.
Yes. So where is lettuce coming from? Cyclosporiasis and many other diarrheal diseases are due to fecal oral contamination, medical words. But that means that wastewater with human waste has been used in some way to either fertilize or to water the plants. And then somehow the plants that were produced were mixed in with a lot of other plants, because this has now affected 47 states. So lettuce traveling to 47 states, it's one can hardly imagine how what would presumably be one small area which is being where the plants are being fertilized or watered incorrectly has somehow led to this major outbreak, which could have affected as many as 1 million Americans. How does that happen?
Well, this particular outbreak, the FDA has traced it back to locations in Mexico where Taylor Farms is sourcing that produce. And from there, it like I said, it ends up getting spread all across the country. So, that's really why we're seeing this widespread issue. And it's really unfortunate, especially in the summer at a time when the United States is so very capable of growing lettuce here at home. But the companies like Taylor Farms, they're kind of a bottleneck in between farmers and the consumer, the grocery stores and restaurants. Taylor Farms, they have consolidated power, they've grown, and they don't like to work with a lot of small farms throughout the United States. They like to have these massive suppliers well positioned to supply the whole country. And so that's why, like you said, it was contaminated water that has affected the lettuce. Sounds like a location in Mexico. And from there, it's just spread like wildfire across the United States.
Yeah. Clearly, they're mixing the lettuce from all these different places. So just like with ground beef, when you get a hamburger, you've got meat from 1,000 cows or more in that hamburger. When you buy a bag of lettuce, it could have come from many different countries and states, and mixed together, you don't know what you're getting. Anyway, Americans have been sick. In my grocery store, they now say they're using local lettuce. We're not selling you, national brand bagged lettuce, which is quite interesting. Um, we've both had some good luck treating ourselves with raw garlic and with silver, colloidal silver. So those are things to consider. There's only one antibiotic. It's a combination antibiotic, but it is a sulfa drug, and many people are allergic to sulfa drugs. So the allopathic doctors don't give you any other options, but there probably are other options. Let's move on. Everybody remembers that we had a dire situation here in which basically no consumers got sick of bird flu in 2024 and 5, and the price of eggs went up to almost $1 an egg in some places. Hundreds of millions of chickens were culled because it was said they had bird flu. Everybody was talking about bird flu. There were vaccines being developed for humans, for chickens, and for cows. And then when Trump came in, it all disappeared. The FDA and USDA stopped looking crazily for cases of bird flu and found that there were very little when they didn't search for them. But the companies had made enormous sums of money while the consumers were paying a huge amount more. The companies were managing to produce less. They were getting paid a lot of money per bird that they killed. And so finally, now the DOJ took them to court and said, look, you've been price fixing because you were basically a cartel. There were 3 or 4 egg companies that were servicing about half the country. Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely, yes. Farm Action started investigating the egg price spike back in late 22. That's when egg prices more than doubled at that point in late 2022. Egg production did fall somewhat because of the bird flu, but not enough to explain the huge price increases that we were seeing. And meanwhile, these dominant egg companies were just reporting extraordinary profits. Cal-Maine alone is a great example. They're the largest egg company in the United States. And just last year, fiscal year 2025, they made $1.2 billion in profits. So we first called for an investigation back in January of 2023, presented the evidence to the FTC and DOJ. They did not take action. We did so again in February 2025, and the DOJ did open an investigation into the egg industry, which was great. Unfortunately, as you alluded to, the DOJ, along with 17 state attorney general, just recently here, they did accuse Cal-Maine and these other companies of coordinating information to push up the egg prices
Which
against
is
the law.
illegal. This is illegal.
Yes.
When these companies control a large share of the market and collude to control prices and to control availability of their product, we passed laws in the late 1800s to stop that. But our government has not been enforcing those laws. So sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
No, great point. Absolutely. This was absolutely illegal. The DOJ found that they've been breaking the law. Unfortunately, though, the settlement was very weak, and ultimately, these companies can write it off as just a cost of doing business because, like I said, Cal-Maine made $1.2 billion in profit just last year. In this settlement, they had to pay $1.5 million. So that's a tiny, tiny fraction of their ill-gotten profits. And on top of it, as you were referencing, these companies also raked in a lot of taxpayer money on top of it. So on one side, they were price gouging us. On the other, taxpayers were forced to pay for the avian flu response. So first, the Biden administration provided about $1.4 billion to the egg industry to offset their bird flu losses. And then the Trump administration followed up with another $1 billion. So about $2.5 billion to these huge poultry companies. who, by the way, their own operations magnify these outbreaks. They're only getting larger. Back 30 years ago, the midpoint of an egg-laying flock size was about 118,000 birds, which is a lot. But today, that's 1.2 million birds. They're crowded into these cramped cages, and this system, it leaves consumers paying higher prices, taxpayers covering those disease losses. Farmers have less power. The farmers raising the eggs for Cal-Maine were getting 26 cents a dozen, while these companies were selling eggs for upwards of $10 a dozen. So it was just a horrible situation all around. Really good example, though, of why we need to break up these monopolies and support local and regional food systems. When it comes to eggs, when it comes to our lettuce, across the supply, we are seeing these same problems.
So let's move over to the U.S. cattle herd, which is at its lowest level since 1951, even lower than last year, which was a record since 1951. How does that affect the price of meat, affect farmers, affect everything? And why is the herd so small when farmers are going under and they need to make money? Why don't they have more cows?
Yes, so the herd is shrinking. Unfortunately, it's really tough for America's cattle producers right now. Four companies control about 85% of beef processing, up from just about 36% in the 1970s. So those four companies, they controlled 36% of the industry in the 70s. Today it's 85. That's huge. And as they've gained that power, the rancher's share of the retail beef dollar fell. They were getting about 60 cents on the dollar back in the 70s. Today it's 30 cents of every dollar we spend goes back to the ranchers. So they're struggling. That's why the herd, that's a big part of why the herd is shrinking. They're also facing issues like drought. But years of ranchers leaving the business and shrinking their herds, it's left the U.S. with fewer cattle. So one impact of that has been higher prices. When there's fewer supply, prices can go up. But the issue is that ranchers need a competitive market and the confidence so that they can make money, before they're able to invest in rebuilding their herds. And one thing I really want to highlight, Farm Action took a deep dive. We released a set of policy recommendations on how to reverse this trend. It's on our website under our policy recommendations on our website. But basically there's a lot of talk about increasing imports, right? We're already increasing imports from Argentina. Our concern is that more beef imports would push down the prices paid to U.S. ranchers, and that it wouldn't actually lower grocery prices at all in such a concentrated market, because these large meat packers can just capture any profit. So what we need to do, we need to rebuild the U.S. domestic cattle production, but we need to restore competition to do that. We need to expand regional processing so that producers have a place to take their cattle and to get them to the consumer. And finally, a big one, we need to restore country of origin labeling. We have beef coming in from all over the place. The origin is not labeled. If you look at any other product in your home, from a t-shirt to pet food, every product is required to have the country of origin labeled. And the only reason that beef and pork do not is because of the influence of these large multinational meat packing companies that had the labeling repealed. So that's a big fight. It's part of the Farm Bill right now, and it would go a long way to helping our ranchers and restoring our cattle supply.
I will say that it was gratifying that I watched the senators mark up the Farm Bill last week. And surprisingly, there was bipartisan support for country of origin labeling. However, the Farm Bill they marked up did not pass through the committee. So it all has to be done again. But at least there seems to be growing awareness that the food is a bipartisan, and the price of food is a bipartisan issue, of course. So we want both parties to support, the public on these issues. All right. Now, let's see. The price of farmland. So young farmers can't get into the business. Old farmers are aging out or they're losing money, going bankrupt. They want to sell their properties, but the land is very expensive. So the farmer can make much more money by selling his land than by growing crops or animals. That's a crazy situation. It leads to tremendous consolidation, not only in the processors of food, but also in the owners of land. Can you talk about why that's happening when the amount farmers are getting for their livestock and for their commodities and vegetables and fruits, why the prices are going down or staying stable for those, and yet the price of land is going up and young farmers can't get into the business? What's that about?
Yeah, so like you said, we're seeing the prices farmers are receiving are dropping. Meanwhile, farmland values are remaining near record highs. Many farmers are now having to rent land, and they're projected to lose money on their crops. So it's really not a good situation. The problem is we've got these major investors. Bill Gates is one we always talk about. So I'll use that example. Bill Gates is the largest private farmland owner in the United States with roughly 242 million acres of farmland alone. So folks like him, they see it as an investment opportunity. 348 million acres of U.S. farmland are rented, so there's less and less ownership, and the folks that own the land are not farmers themselves. So, and then farmers who already own significant land, they're able to use that wealth as collateral to buy even more. So what we're seeing these smaller farms fail, go out of business. Their land usually doesn't become a new family farm. It's getting absorbed into these larger existing operations or bought up, by folks like Bill Gates and these other investors. So yeah, the question is who will be able to own America's farmland in the future as farmers are aging out and that land's getting consolidated.
Yeah, and since the number of people in the United States has doubled, actually fewer acres are being farmed now than were in the 1950s, which is crazy. But that's how it is. All right. Next subject is the very badly named Save Our Bacon Act, which does the reverse. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So a number of states, including California is kind of the hot button issue here, but states have passed laws overwhelmingly supported by the voters to support crate-free pork. So they support raising animals with enough room to move and express some natural behaviors. It's been a great thing for family farmers who raise their animals outside of these crates and in more humane ways. So farmers, they're receiving a premium. It's helping them stay in hog farming and pass their farms to the next generation. But the problem is big pork, companies like China-owned Smithfield Foods, they are pushing Congress to override these state laws like California's Proposition 12. And the so-called Save Our Bacon Act, it would undermine these state laws and the independent farmers who are benefiting from it. So basically, they want to tell these big pork companies, they've gone to Congress, they want to tell the states, you can no longer set standards around how food is produced in your state. They want to force states like Iowa, the elected officials from Iowa are a big part of this push. They want to tell California, Massachusetts, these other states that you have to buy our pork and the way we grow it, even though you don't want it. So that's what's happening. The Senate Agriculture Committee did not vote on the Save Our Bacon Act during the Farm Bill markup last week. So that was a very positive step. I think it's a testament to how controversial this issue is.
Let me interrupt. When you say they didn't vote on it, what you mean is that it was not included in the Farm Bill. It was not allowed in as an amendment for the Senate. And it was also removed from it was in the original earlier version of the Farm Bill, but the House took it out because it was very controversial. And at the moment, it's out of the Senate version of the bill. But it could come back when the House and Senate come together and only a few leadership members decide on what the final bill is going to look like. Let me also say, so what is happening in these big farms, in Smithfield's farms, is that the animals are living in a box or a crate their entire life. They can't turn around. They can't walk. They're just basically being fed, almost like geese, who are being force fed. And that's all they do. They're fed and then they die. The crates originally were there to protect baby pigs so that the mother wouldn't roll over and crush them. They weren't intended to live in these crates for many months, just simply to do it when they had newborn pigs. But that's not how they're being used. And so some people are trying to fool the public and say, well, we need these crates because of this problem, but not the way they're being used. The other issue is that it's preemption by the federal government of states' rights. So the 10th Amendment to the Constitution says if it hasn't been specified in the Constitution that the federal government has a particular right or authority, then that right or authority devolves to the states. And so what's happening, and what we saw recently with glyphosate, that the federal government was trying to take over control, was trying to take away any responsibility for pesticides from the states. And so the executive order that Trump issued, efforts in the Congress, it was part of the Farm Bill and part of an appropriations bill to basically take away the right of states to regulate pesticides. But the Bayer that was spearheading that effort also had gone to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled for Bayer after Trump's DOJ twice instructed it to do so. And so that sort of spared our politicians. They didn't have to vote in favor of something that was deeply unpopular with the public, which is, giving away the right to sue a pesticide manufacturer in a state court because the label that was approved by the EPA, that was worked on by the industry and the EPA, didn't provide warnings of what the side effects were. That sounds very complicated. But basically, for example, glyphosate. The EPA gave glyphosate a label over 30 years ago based on falsified data, falsified scientific studies. And that label has never been updated properly. They started to, but it was done wrong. A judge ordered the EPA to redo the label, and they haven't so far. And as part of the House version of the Farm Bill, they've been given another 5 years before they have to change the label. So we have labels on pesticides that are inaccurate, that are basically lies, deliberate lies created by the manufacturers. And now, because of those lies, people are not being warned of the dangers. They're using these products and exposing themselves to sometimes deadly harms, and they won't be able to sue. They previously could not sue effectively in federal court, and now they won't be able to win cases based on failure to warn in state courts either. So that was an act of preemption. The feds trying to take away responsibility for safety in their state from state government. This is another example of preemption, where again if the Save Our Bacon Act does wind up in the final version of the Farm Bill, it would be again the federal government telling states you cannot make better rules for the animals being raised in your states. Now, again, it's unconstitutional, but these sort of things have been happening for well over 100 years. So there's precedent, but it's still unconstitutional. And, one of the things that everybody knows about is how the federal government took over and preempted the states from allowing lawsuits for injuries from vaccines. And that was due to the 1986 law, the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. So the federal government keeps taking away state authorities that were given to the states in the Constitution. And do we want to keep allowing the centralization of power within the federal government? We know the federal government is captured. The state governments can also be captured, but at least there's 50 of them. It's harder to capture all of them. And we're closer to our representatives, so we can actually talk to them, where it's very hard to get to the representatives at the national level. So do you have anything else to say about Save Our Bacon, Angela?
I think you captured it really well, and yeah, it is a preemption issue. It touches so many other issues, but you know, I just everyone needs to stay vigilant. I double checked the House Farm Bill did in fact include the Save Our Bacon Act. The Senate version currently does not have it in there, so this will be an ongoing issue as the Senate probably takes up the Farm Bill now in September or later. And so we need to keep it out of the Senate version. And then when it goes to conference, there will be a conference committee, the House and the Senate, and they need to work it out and come to terms with a farm bill that either has the Save Our Bacon Act in it or not. And all of our voices are really important to, you know, push back against these huge lobbyists like Smithfield Foods, who our elected officials are hearing from every day. They need to hear from us too, that this matters. We care about states' rights. We care about animal welfare and healthy food, and keeping mama pigs out of these horrible gestation crates.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll give you an example. JBS, which is the world's largest beef producer and the US's largest beef producer. So not a processor, I should say, not producer. So they will buy the meat from the ranchers, but then they will process it, label it, and sell it to grocery stores and others. They have well over 100 different labels, so you don't know that the meat you're buying is theirs. You think that there are different qualities and types of meat, but it's all the same. But that company, which has been found guilty of bribing over 1,000 politicians in Brazil, where they started bribing in order to expand, has expanded into the US, gotten onto the New York Stock Exchange, and donated $5 million to Trump's inauguration. I think they were the biggest donor to Trump's inauguration. So this is how they exert their power, and enough people can thwart it, but it takes a lot of effort. And so you need to contact your senators and members and tell them we don't want this. Okay, final thing is the New Hampshire bill, which is all about allowing farmers to sell meat to the public, okay? Everybody knows that in around 1900, a book came out, Arrowhead, about the terrible conditions in meat processing, meat slaughterhouse facilities. And this was the large ones. And as a result, a law was passed, the FMIA, to regulate meat processing companies. That law had nothing to do with farmers. Farmers were explicitly exempted from that law, and they could sell to whoever they wanted, in state or out of state or internationally. But later, there was an amendment to that law in 1967 called the Wholesome Meat Act. So Congress passed this, and all of a sudden, farmers weren't even allowed to sell their meat directly to the public in their own state. And New Hampshire was doing this where I live. Since then, so that wound up putting a lot of farmers and ranchers out of business because, as Angela told you, they were in the old days able to get about 60 cents or 60% of the money you spent, 60 cents for every dollar you spent on meat in the grocery. But subsequently, with many monopolies and centralization and cartels forming, they are now making 30 cents on the dollar for the meat they sell to meat processing companies. And they haven't been allowed. So by not allowing them to sell their meat directly to the public, first of all, the animals have to be transported to a USDA inspected facility. It costs more to go through one of those facilities, several dollars a pound. So it's costing the consumers several dollars a pound more to have the animals shipped to these facilities and to go through them. And yet the actual inspection that the USDA is able to do is very rudimentary, very performative. So it turns out the USDA inspectors are on the same line as the workers, and often they get a fraction of a second to look at an animal as it goes down the line. The inspectors are standing there and the animals are going through very quickly, and the inspectors are expected to find scabs and abscesses and other lesions, but they can't really see enough. They can't do enough. And there aren't enough of them. So USDA lost about 10% of its inspectors last year, after DOGE went through the federal agencies. And even before that, the USDA was so-called modernizing its inspections, and decided to use fewer inspectors and use people who worked for the actual meat processors to do some of the inspecting themselves. As a result, there have been much fewer animals flagged for having problems, and more complaints to the USDA of foodborne illnesses arising from animals that went through USDA inspection. My whole point is that USDA inspection is really not a guarantee of wholesome quality meat. So we now have something like 40% of the farmers growing at livestock that we had in the 60s before this law passed. The cost of meat, of course, is much higher. There are fewer grocery stores. Most of the slaughterhouses have closed down. And my organization, and I imagine Angela's also, my organization, Door to Freedom, and our project, Save Our Food and Farms, is very interested in turning this around. We don't think the federal government should be able to preempt state authority on food and vaccines and other things. We think that the authority needs to go back to the states. New Hampshire is challenging the federal government. So a bill was passed in both houses of the New Hampshire legislature saying that farmers could sell their meat directly to customers without going through the USDA, as long as they were small farmers processing only no more than 3 cows or 5 pigs or 10 sheep or goats per month, no more than that, or some combination. And the farmer would be able to sell at farmers markets or off the farm, basically, or at a farm stand. He couldn't sell to groceries. But in other words, if a customer knows that farmer's reputation and chooses to specifically go to a place to buy that farmer's meat, not a supermarket, or goes to a restaurant where the meat is labeled where it came from on the menu, farmers would be able to sell in those venues. They could then collect much more of the retail price, and customers could pay less, because right now, most of the money is going to the grocery cartels and the meat processing cartels. Grocery stores now are raising the price they pay for meat, and they're getting it already packaged up to $4 a pound. So they're adding up to $4 a pound onto the cost of your meat. So anyway, this would be a win-win for everybody who eats meat and for the farmers raising the meat. It would be a slap in the face, though, to USDA and to the cartels that process meat. So it passed the 2 houses. The governor rejected it, vetoed it in July, and on August 19th, the legislature is coming back to determine if they can get a 2/3 vote from both houses to override the governor's veto. And this could be the start. There are other states that want to do the exact same thing. There are 2 states that have passed laws that say we're going to do it if a court decides that we can. And so this is the beginning of a national movement. And we are hoping that everybody watching this will contact their representatives and senators in New Hampshire and tell them we want an override of the government's veto. The bill is HB 396. It will make meat more affordable in the state and help our ranchers, farmers, and slaughterhouses to maintain profitability. And if you're from another state, we want you to call your representatives and senators and tell them that you need a bill like this in your state, because we need to take back the control of meat at the state and local level and stop allowing captured federal agencies to manage our food supply. Food is expensive enough. We have to turn this around and know where our meat is coming from, which right now, if you go to the grocery store, is impossible. Anything you want to add, Angela?
No, Meryl, you captured it well. Thanks so much for leading the charge on this on New Hampshire and yeah, we're with you. We need to take back control of our food supply.
Yes, so help us do it. We're looking at you, our supporters. We need all the help we can get. It's a very important issue. We do not want huge industries to take over the entire food supply, which is where things are going. We have to turn it around. And thank you very much. Thank you so much, Angela. It's been a delight having you. I hope you come back. All right.
Will do. Thanks so much for having me, Meryl.
I'm Dennis McGee,
And this is about a friend of yours.
my friend Daniel Freeman.
Okay, so did Daniel take the COVID shot?
I don't know. I think he did. A lot of our group did. I benefited. I watched David Icke, the dot connector, early in 20, and I knew it was a sham. I knew it was a scam. He pointed out there was no excess death in 20. We were having a flu season. I knew that. I tried to tell everybody that I knew that the shots were poison. They were liquid cancer.
But you don't know his medical history, so you don't know if he took it or he didn't.
I do not.
Right, okay, so let's leave it at that then. So what made him go to hospital?
He got COVID. He brought his family on a cruise. When he got back, he had COVID. They went to the hospital. They put him on a ventilator. They took him off the ventilator. They transferred him to another hospital. They put him back on the ventilator. This went on for days. And he finally succumbed on August 7 of 20. We didn't get to talk to him. We didn't get to see him. We had just back and forth communications with his family and members of our group.
So why do you think they killed him?
Say again?
Why do you think they killed him?
For the same reason they killed 800,000 others. They wanted to sell that product. They sold a bunch of it. No, it was medical murder. I am a Vietnam era Army medic. I got trained I have some knowledge of medicine. I went on to train as a mobile intensive care paramedic. I've helped put people on ventilators. In the Army, I served in maternal child health care section at Madigan Army Medical Center at Tacoma, Washington. We're a 1,100 bed hospital. I had 3 neurosurgeons in the house all the time. I started out in Well Child Clinic, went to pediatrics, went to normal newborn nursery, the OBGYN clinic, and ended up in the neonatal intensive care nursery at Madigan. In '75, we were one of 3 neonatal intensive care nurseries on the West Coast. All of our patients were on ventilators because they didn't live long enough in utero to develop the ability to breathe. We're very familiar with ventilators. In pre-hospital emergency medicine, ventilators are contraindicated unless there's trauma. Of course, in heart attacks, when people stop breathing, we have to put them on a ventilator. It's a very violent process, period. My wife has had major surgeries, and of course, they reduce you to near death, and we have to breathe for you while that's going on. That's normal, that's routine. Very specialized people, highly trained, do this well, routinely. It is contraindicated in people with just respiratory problems. They killed people like that. Pressures were increased too high. We know this. They killed Daniel. There was no reason in the world to put that man on a ventilator. Just like the other 800 some odd thousand they murdered him. I knew it when it happened because I have some knowledge of medicine. It's contraindicated, period. Anthony Fauci and the NIH came out with these protocols specifically to kill people. I've got a message for them. We're coming for them. It's happening. This is part of it. This is the gentle part. The best they can possibly do is call up those judges they corrupted, bribed, badgered into violating their oaths and beg for protective custody. We're coming. They're criminals. They know it. We know it. They know we know it. We're coming for them.
Why do you think they killed so many with these ventilators? Because as you sit in here, this is our memorial, and most of the people in here have been killed the same way as your friend. What's it about?
It's about total control. There is a class of, call them the elites. I call them the E-lights, because they're light of mentality. I can't conceive of them as wholly human. This is so inhuman, is the best word I can come up for with it. They want total control. They want to live forever. They think they can engineer that. They're wrong. I got news for them. Everything that lives dies. This is our reality in our existence. When we die, they're controlling that with millions of people now, and obviously have no right to do that. They think us useless eaters. They're wrong. They think us stupid, ignorant, useless eaters. They're wrong. Ignorance can be fixed. I'm overcoming my own personal ignorance. I wasn't involved. I was among, for years and years and years, and I'm ashamed to say this, but it's true, I was among the apathetic, the great unwashed, if you will. I just didn't care. I was living my life. I was trusting government to do its damn job. They've stopped doing that now. I don't know who bought them. They want total control. They want to live forever. They think we're useless. They're wrong. The ignorance is being overcome rapidly. You folks are a wonderful part of that. I'm so grateful for you. I really, really am. I've seen you on the net several times. It's wonderful to get to see you in person, and thank you so much for doing this.
Well, so we've interviewed a lot of people who have talked about their loved ones. They've got the medical records and they've gone through it after they've been killed, like your friend. And all of them are given those paralytic drugs, so they can't, and they're struggling. They're put in 4-point restraints, and then they're vented. That's
Yes.
barbaric.
It is barbaric. One of my younger brothers had bypass surgeries in 21. I went to see him at St. Thomas Hospital in Nashville. He was fully conscious with a vent tube in him, and he was restrained. He was crying. He was struggling. He was hurting. It was grotesque. I didn't pull the tube because I was afraid they would kill him when I left the room. I didn't cut him loose so he could do it. And I cried my way back home. And I know to this moment, we're coming for those people too. There are records. I don't know what kind of insanity. I can't explain it. They think we don't know. They're wrong. It's all so public. Our system is bastardized and warped now and mutated till it's almost unrecognizable. That's going to change. It is changing as I speak, as we speak. This is part of it. I'd rather be at home working in my shop. I came over here 2+ hours to tell this to the whole world, okay? It's got to stop. It will stop. It will stop. It's inevitable. There's a pendulum swinging in reality, in existence. It's coming back this way. It went that way for a long time. It's coming back. And it will come back with a roar. The best hope for the people who have done this is to get in the system. In America, they have rights. They've abused privileges, but they have the right to claim sanctuary within our system, and that's their very best bet. If the owners kill Bobby Kennedy or Donald Trump or Joe Biden to start a war, they're not going to like the result, because a lot of us know who our enemy is. We'll go to D.C. and get the criminals that have done this. We're not going to fight each other. They want to program me to hate one of my best friends, is black as the ace of spades, is his t-shirt. They want me to hate him. Not happening, come on. Not happening. They want a race war. They're not going to get it. Because so many of us understand who our enemy is. And our enemy are the owners who have corrupted this system. We're going to go right to the top. I saw a guy on X last night talking to Alex Jones, a former Green Beret. He's saying they have a list. What are these creatures? They think we don't know. They think we're all stupid and ignorant, and they're wrong. They're public figures. Anthony Fauci, where are you going to go, bud? When this becomes public knowledge, when the consensus crystallizes, we're going to go get them. Their very best bet is go to the government now, call the corrupt judge, and claim sanctuary. Because there's millions of us out here who have been offered no quarter and who will give no quarter. If our system fails and they make we the people do this, they're not going to like the result, because it's not going to be pretty, and it's going to be very fast. If they, the owners, kill one of these 3 men to start a war, we're going right for them. I'm not fighting my neighbors. I'm not fighting anybody because of their skin color. I know who's done this. They're all public figures. We know where they live. In Tennessee, we have the Tennessee Citizens for State Sovereignty, who are bringing legislation in our state capital to enable us to nullify federal overreach, to nullify all this criminality that they're shoving on us. They really think in D.C., all those people who signed the PrEP Act believe they've gotten away with it. Wrong. No, they haven't. This is being addressed, will be addressed in Tennessee. We'll nullify that so we can sue pharma. They think pharma's protected. Wrong. None of that legislation is constitutional. It will not stand the test of time. We will bring them to court. We will win. Texas is already doing it. I love it. We'll do it here too. When the ball starts rolling, it will snowball unimaginably and unimaginably quickly. The dike is failing. It's failing. I love it. I want to see it happen.
You're a very good friend to Daniel. Thank you for telling his story and the barbaric way he was killed. Thank you for doing that. And we're going to remember him. We're going to get a photograph. We're going to put him up here in that thing. People remember, this is his views, not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defence, because we all know everybody wants to take down Children's Health Defence.
No.
So we have this disclaimer that we put out. We all know what that means.
Oh yeah, let me say it. This is Denny speaking for Denny and millions of other Americans, but not Children's Health Defense. This is my opinion. These are my views. It's going to happen. We're coming for you, bud. We're coming for you. You better go in the system, because you won't like it if we have to do it.
Thank you for telling your story. Thank you for your opinion. Thank you for driving so far to be here and sitting here and telling us this.
You're very welcome.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.